Good afternoon and welcome.
Continuous.
Thank you for joining us. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, February 5th.
I got all this equipment.
First on our agenda today, we have representatives here from AMVETS Riders and Chrome Divas who are here to make a presentation. So feel free to come forward, and I think they'd like the police chief to join them. You might take a minute to introduce yourselves and let us know more about your organizations. There's the mic right there. So.
Hi, I'm Kelly Thomas. I'm with the AMVETS Post 6 from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Our organization benefits veterans locally from our community and the surrounding communities as well. We do motorcycle rides throughout the course of the year that, again, benefit our local veterans and the veterans around the community. We also do a lot with some of the food banks here in town and team up with the Chrome Divas to, again, help the community.
I'm Nikki Weiss. I'm Assistant Director of the Chrome Divas of Cedar Rapids, and as she stated, last year we teamed up together for this event as we're both raising funds for the Linn County veterans.
So tell us about the event.
Tell
us about the event.
The event, it's a ride. I think it consisted of maybe about 100 miles or so.
Yeah, it was about 126, I think, to be correct.
We go through generally we go through the smaller towns as there's less traffic, but we stopped here in Marion. And we raise money through raffles, 50-50, and silent auctions for our local charities. And the Chrome Divas do various events, and we team up to do a veterans event with these guys, and also other charities that benefit the local communities, Cedar Rapids, Marion, and so forth.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So the plaque last year.
Please speak in the mic, because these meetings are recorded, so we would like it to have it.
I'm Julie Jasper, another member of the Chrome Divas, and last year on May 5th, we had an awareness ride to kick off the start of motorcycle season. Make motorcycles and cars both aware of each other on the road. All of the benefits from that ride went to the food pantry, as we talked about, but we came through Marion, which is something we have not done in quite a while, and it was such a welcoming and warming day. And we had a police officer that met us at the edge of town and brought us through town, and even now we run into people that were on our ride or saw our ride come through town, and they still talk about it, how really nice it really was.
I'd like to say they not only brought us through town and met us at the edge of town, it was an escort through town. It was, I don't recall if there were sirens, but there were lights. They had traffic stopped for us to make sure that we got through town safely, got our motorcycles parked safely. Nothing but the finest and above and beyond any expectation that we could have ever had. And that's tremendous. That is a tremendous thank you to us for what we're doing. The least we can do is thank them for the tremendous, tremendous support that they gave us. All right, so
They're going to end their ride in Marion next year.
Where did they end up at? Where did you end up?
Brick Alley.
Brick Alley?
Yes, fantastic place, fantastic establishment, wonderful, everything was great.
Thank you. We're glad you had a good experience.
I'm thinking selfie, but I'm okay.
I just got to figure the phone out.
So on behalf of AMVETS Post 6 and the Chrome Divas,
You do.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you to the chief and the police department for once again representing Marion in such a wonderful way. Okay, so the Uptown Marion update will be on Thursday instead of today, is that correct? Okay. Then moving on to consent agenda items under administrative services, there are a couple items starred.
So this is just to note the meeting changes coming up. The February 19th work session was recommended to move to 6 p.m. due to council members and staff attending Legislative Day. And then we would be scheduling a special meeting for draft 2 of the budget on February 12th.
Okay, so everyone understand those 2 items? At the last meeting, we discussed moving the start time of the work session on February 19th so that members can attend Legislative Day in Des Moines. Any questions on those? Any concerns?
Nope.
Anybody going? Just for,
Play today?
Yeah, we'll plan to go. I'm planning to go.
okay.
I'm going.
Two.
Randy?
I just
And
asked.
Just for clarification, the budget meeting is still scheduled at 4 p.m., is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. There's no questions or comments on those. We'll move on. Anything that's not starred on that portion of the agenda that anyone wants to discuss? This would be a good time. Otherwise, we're on number 13, the audit report. Is that Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, we have Jennifer Decker here with Hogan Hansen. And,
Yes.
was going to do a short presentation or long presentation, depending on how many questions you have about the audit report.
Questions you'd like?
Welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. You're good?
Yes.
Okay.
We're good.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor
Good afternoon.
and members of the City Council. I'm Jennifer Decker, as Lon said, and I'm with Hogan Hansen. And I wanted to first thank you for allowing us to present your audit this year, as well as perform it. I'd also like to thank Leanne, as well as the rest of the city staff, for all of the courtesies they extended us during our performance of your audit. Hogan Hansen issued an unmodified opinion for the year ended June 30, 2018, and overall the city is in financially good position. We did adopt a new Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB statement number 75 this year, which is the accounting and financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pensions. So that resulted in us restating the financial statements at the beginning of the year, and that was required by GASB. It wasn't anything that the city had a choice in, so we had to do that this year. I'll share a few highlights from the audit, and then we'll focus on the findings because Lon said there was a special request to do that this year, so
Sure.
we will do that.
Thank you.
So the city's total governmental fund balances, which includes the general fund, debt service fund, capital projects funds, and special revenue funds, increased by approximately $2.2 million for the year. The general obligation debt increased by $6.1 million. And as of June 30, 2018, the general fund, which is the chief operating fund of the city, had a fund balance of $11 million. And comparing that to the total expenditures for the general fund, it was about half, which is where you kind of want to be in regards to having enough fund balance to cover your expenditures. So that is a good thing. The city's total business type activities, the net assets increased approximately $5.3 million. And those business type activities are the sewer rental replacement, city communication and utility, solid waste and replacement funds, urban forest utility, and stormwater management funds. The financial statements that are in front of you do include the component units of the City of Marion, and those would be the Marion Water Department, Friends of the Marion Library and the Foundation, the Marion's Parks and Recreation Foundation, as well as the Firefighters Association. And even though those entities are legally separate, it would be misleading not to include those in the financial statements, so that's why they are included. And that is required under GASB statements. So if you wanted to turn in your report to pages 75 and 76, that would be where the schedule of findings and question costs starts. So the internal control deficiencies that we noted, there are 3 of them. The segregation of duties comment,
And this is a repeat from year after year after year, which basically says in English, there's a whole long list there of things, that to properly segregate duties among all of the staff people, you would have to hire more people. Now, there's obviously a cost benefit. You have to live in a budget. So you do the best with what you have. Now, there are mitigating controls in place. It's not anything to really get heartburn with. Would the city attorney like to comment on how many cities in Iowa have a segregation of duties finding? Basically, they all do, because again, we have to live in a budget. So that is just telling you that the effect of having a segregation of duties issue is that we could adversely affect the city's ability to prevent or detect and correct misstatements, errors, or misappropriation on a timely basis by employees in the normal course of performing their functions. So that is what that is. There's nothing to get heartburn about. Every city in Iowa gets it. The second finding there, the financial statement preparation finding, is that you rely on your audit firm to write these 78 pages of financial statements. Not that you couldn't do it, but again, it's a cost-benefit thing. The city keeps their books on the cash basis of accounting, and then we have to convert those to accrual basis. And again, this is not an uncommon finding in cities in Iowa. And then the third finding would be the one that we could improve upon. The credit card policy requires employees to submit receipts to support purchases, and the department heads then approve those expenditures. In some cases, there are credit card statements that are not being approved by department heads on a consistent basis, and then therefore we're dispersing funds without proper supporting documentation. So we can improve upon that. It could be, there's an inconsistent approval process across departments, or it could be just simple as employee error. So those are, our recommendation would be that obviously in the perfect world, every receipt would be accounted for, and it would detail what was purchased and be attached to the credit card statement, and then that would be reviewed by the department head. So again, we live in perfect land, and we understand there's employee error.
My question on that is, did you find that was a frequent issue, or is this just something that you found a few times?
It happened within our sampling. We don't test every credit card statement that
So
runs
within your
through the
sample,
city.
you found some of those.
So we did find this in our sample. It didn't elevate to the point where, I'm going to have heartburn about it, but I have to let you know what I found. So that's why it's in the report.
Do you remember how many you found in your sample?
Well, since I sampled this back in August, I don't recall off the top of my head, Mr.
Don't have
Jensen.
it in your notes. Very good.
But I can definitely let you know if that interests you.
Yeah. I mean, I could see something like that happening occasionally, but
Oh, yeah.
my question would be, how frequent is it really
Sure.
occurring?
And so if you look at the notes here, we didn't elevate it to a material weakness. So it wasn't material to the financial statements, but it was significant enough to warrant.
Yeah, to be noted.
So yes, significant deficiency. So would I say it happened every time? No.
Right.
But again, human error, it could be just inconsistencies between department, but it's something we could work on. Okay. So that would be that finding. And then part 2, which starts on page 77, so page 77 and 78, these are all the things that the Code of Iowa requires us to report on during the year, and it's kind of like a pass-fail test. So you'll notice a lot of them, like 18.2A, the certified budget, we note that disbursements did not exceed the amounts on the amended budget. So if you go down the list, really the only ones of, warranting talking about would be 18.2B. We have to document any questionable expenditures we find during our testing. These are items that could very well be fine for the city to spend money on, but the line is thin. So anything we found in our sampling that we noted that we thought council should be aware of, we reported those there. Does anyone have any questions regarding those particular instances? Okay. And then 18.2C, there were no expenditures of city money for travel expenses of spouses of city officials or employees noted. 18.2D, business transactions.
No business transactions were noted between the city and city officials or employees. We had proper bond coverage. 18.2F, city council minutes. No transactions were found that we believe should have been approved in the city council minutes, but were not. 18.2G, the deposits and investments policy was complied with. 18.2H, tax increment financing. So the required report says that you have to report only the amount that is coming due in the next year, and Lynn County would prefer it not be done that way. So the city is doing it in compliance with what Lynn County would like, but that is not what the Code of Iowa says you're supposed to do. So that is that particular finding. That one I always find humorous, but they're doing what Lynn County asked because that is the tax body that you work with. So but we have to tell you,
So we
you did
discuss
it.
this every year.
That we did it wrong. So there you go. 18.2I, the annual urban renewal report was filed timely. And then 18.2J, the AFR had a discrepancy in the proprietary funds, and that has been corrected. So that would be all of the findings noted in the audit for the year ended June 30, 2018.
Okay. Questions? Comments?
I always tell people, the auditor has the most thankless job. We're the teacher that has to come and tell you, you got 9 out of 10 on that board right, but we're only going to point out the one you got wrong. That's what we do.
Well, it's good for us to have that. And so I guess the items that we can do something about, we will be working on improving our...
No, and really, the city of Marion does a fabulous job. I audit a lot of cities in Iowa, and I cannot say the same about many of them. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
and I can get that number for you, Mr. Jensen, if you'd like.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah,
Be in
thanks.
touch. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, any comments or discussion on the audit report? Okay. Moving on. There's one item start under community development, but prior to that, is there anything under the engineering agenda for police and fire that anybody wants to discuss individually? Okay. Community development.
Yes, so the item start is relative to the City Council's action to direct us to proceed with the ordinance regulating fireworks sales. And so we've just really proceeded with that. We were planning to go to the commission with that proposal, which basically just allows sale in industrial areas, which is similar that's been done in Cedar Rapids and the Des Moines Metro. Just so the council is aware, and I think it's been noted that the state is now reviewing a bill that would prohibit the city's ability to limit sales to specific districts. I guess limit the ability to restrict sales in commercial and industrial districts. So if that bill goes through, there may be some tweaking or some challenging, or some questions, I guess, as we push that back through council. But we want to make sure that we're at least moving something along if it doesn't go through. So we'll just cross that bridge when we get there unless there's concern by the council. But in my mind, a staff recommendation would be to proceed with this. If something comes out of the state, we'll amend our ordinance if the council chooses to do that.
Doesn't the proposed ordinance, the proposed state law also limit our ability to limit the use also? It's not just about sales, it's about use also, right?
Was it about use? I didn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Yes, it was. But it was for the cities, they have to allow the letting off of fireworks for one day,
One day.
but we already do that, so.
Oh, okay, so that wouldn't affect us if they
Right, that
got
would
passed
not
in its
affect
current
us.
form. It would affect us only in terms of limiting where they can be sold.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Questions or discussion? Yes, ma'am.
So I'd actually be curious to know what we're taking to Legislative Day on Marion's behalf, if we could discuss that at some point. But I would again bring up home rule on this if we get this passed and then the state tries to oversmack what we want to do. That might be a good thing to bring up in February.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because the rationale that we're hearing from the proponent of the bill for why we shouldn't be able to regulate where these are sold is because it's a commerce issue and that commerce should be regulated at the state level. But to be quite frank, the extreme example of that would also mean that any adult entertainment ordinances therefore should be considered invalid on their face as well. So if commerce is commerce, and from our position, you shouldn't be picking out different types of commerce to have certain advantages over others, and that's what they're really trying to do here, is to simply cherry pick one certain industry and give them advantages that no other industry in the state would appear to enjoy.
Other questions or discussion?
The other part to your statement, though, Renee, is that I've been monitoring the status of certain bills and watching the league legislative brief, and with that legislative day being on a Tuesday, the week before that I will be going through seeing what the current status of bills are so that we can frame up what we would want to talk to legislators about that day.
And I would imagine that all the large cities that implemented some restrictions are going to be doing the same thing and lobbying against that law.
Especially on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Does the bill still have it where you cannot charge for a fire inspection? Is that still in that bill, or has that been?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It's still there. Just curious if it's been amended or anything so far.
Well, and the bill, doesn't the bill also require that the inspection be done by the state?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would,
The inspection has to be.
essentially, it guts the idea that there's any review at all because the state fire marshal can't get
Right.
to all the tents. So by virtue of requiring the state fire marshal to do it, there will be
No inspection.
That would be nothing.
Yep.
That's terrible.
Yep, there would be no inspection.
That's a critical piece to that.
Absolutely.
It's
Okay.
One more
Yes,
thing.
sir.
Can I ask a question off of this topic, but since we're on community development?
Is it
Well, I'm not sure how to bring
on the agenda or?
Well, it's under would be under community development, but I'm not sure how to get it discussed.
Well, if it's a question to staff, I think you can ask her. We just can't really deliberate on something unless
Right.
it's on the agenda.
Correct. It was more of a question directed to Tom / maybe the city manager to see when to bring this up. That'd be all right.
Mr. City Attorney, is that okay? I mean, if he's just asking a question, we won't deliberate on it. If he has a question to be answered.
That's always kind of the slippery slope is,
Sounds like that.
Why don't I ask it and we'll see if you let me proceed or not.
I mean, if you keep it really narrowly reined in, probably that's going to be okay, but.
Well, it's really just a question of when can this be brought up to try and get some type of ordinance in place.
Okay.
Okay. So there's been talk of bringing a food truck policy ordinance into the city. How or when can that be brought up, or how does that get brought to us to discuss it or direct staff to look into that?
There's a couple of different ways that items get placed on the agenda. One is if it's a recommendation from a board or a commission, so something coming from Parks Board, Planning and Zoning Commission will get on the agenda. The mayor has the ability to ask that an item be placed on the agenda for future discussion, as does any combination of two council members.
And when is the appropriate time to ask for that to be
It
added to
does.
the
It doesn't
council.
actually have to be done during a meeting like this.
It does
could
not.
be done, yeah. If there's a couple of council members interested in that issue, then you would just need to let Rachel know, and we would place it on the agenda.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Guess I didn't need you at all, Tom.
Now I know what's coming.
All right, there's essentially one item on the second part of the consent agenda. Let's not start. Anyone has a question on that one? Otherwise, we'd move on to the regular agenda. None? Okay, on to the regular agenda. There's one item start under, well, there's a couple items. Oh, several items under community development, but prior to that, anything on that part of the agenda? Under item A or E? None? Okay, we'll move on to community development, number 1.
Yes, Your Honor. The item on item 1 and 2 are related. So there's a public hearing on Thursday related to the rezoning of property on 5th Avenue east of 22nd Street on the north side. This is the Lacey property that we acquired. And as I think we've talked about on numerous occasions, this location for the apartment building to be located there, a 50-unit project that we've got a purchase agreement on the property between the city and TWG related to the acquisition of the property if there are low-income housing tax credit awarded to the city. There was a lengthy staff report that kind of spelled out the project and the zoning. The Planning Commission's recommending approval of this. There were some nice illustrations, I think, that kind of highlight the way the building's proposed to look and the site plan. So the project would lie north of 5th Avenue, east of the future extension of 22nd Street, kind of up on the corner, parking on the southeast side. I think it's important to note, and I think at the public hearing there'll be a lot of questions about the project in itself, and I think a lot of it will focus on the fact that it's a low-income housing tax credit project, which really shouldn't be the focus of the conversation because really what they pay in rent isn't necessarily have anything to do with zoning. It's a multifamily use proposed rezoning. So whether it's a rental, single-family home ownership, or a condo, that really isn't the purview of what we'll be reviewing it against. It's a land use decision, whether the property should be used for multifamily development. But you're going to hear a lot of conversations about the affordability component of it, which I'm sure is not surprising. The building, as proposed, this is kind of the concept. It would be brought back with a full site plan and elevation, and all of the material would be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the City Council. I would point out that the project would have to be built consistent with the Green Street standards, which are at the state, which are higher than any of the standards that we have in place for zoning or design review currently. They're even greater than the development ordinance, and probably pretty consistent with the Central Corridor draft zoning plan. So what you're seeing here are brick, hardy board. There's a little bit of the siding that's shaker shingle, but you're looking at a pretty solid structure with good design elements to it. This is very, very similar to the Kingston Village project in downtown Cedar Rapids. So if you've been down in that area, it's essentially the same building facade or building facility. There's a fitness room, a community room. There's a playground associated with the project. There's also a professional development or property manager associated with the project. So that's critical to that maintaining, order in the facility. And I'm sure the police department could probably speak to the fact that that is a big difference in multifamily development with or without professional property management. So that's all a component of it. One of the things that I did want to highlight, and I think it's important to note, and I should have probably done the math here as I brought them forward. But this is a 50-unit facility. I know in the staff report it said 52. It kind of was bounced back and forth. But the application to the state was a 50-unit. So five of the units will be market rate standard. 6 of the units will be at 30% of the median income for Lynn County. And I think the median income is it 56? I think it's 56%. Or $56,000, but I can I'll know that before Thursday, so I can provide that information. So 6 of them will be at 30%, so you have to make less than 30% of the median income. 16 would be at 40% median income, and then 23 of them would be at 60% of median income. So, there's a variety of income levels that are associated with the project, including the 5 that are market rate. And I think you'll find that there's going to be no real issues with how the project comes together. What we've found, and again, I would lean on the police chief, he could probably tell you, the Chapel Ridge has, I don't know that it's necessarily state tax credits in it, but that was a state program, so there are some income restrictions in that building, and I don't know that you hear a whole lot about problems out there. And if you look at the facility, they're brick, they're nice looking, they have a community room. They're actually the only one with a swim pool in town. So you can see that the standard is pretty high when you're talking about state tax credits associated with the building facilities. I think there's a big misconception in the community as to what projects are subsidized and which projects are not. So I think that's a community conversation that we're going to need to kind of have in the future, just to kind of educate the community on the projects like this, because we're going to see more of them. At one time, I had heard that 80% of major multifamily facilities, so like over a 12-plex, 80% of those have state tax credits or some kind of subsidy involved in them, just because to make them affordable, you have to have something. So
it's hard to make them work without some assistance.
Absolutely. We've been very happy with Mr. Sova, who's representing this project. The building, the senior, or the age-restricted apartment behind Casey's on Boyson and Marion Boulevard, nice-looking building. He's the one that developed that. We've got a really good track record with Mr. Sova. He's been to the council a number of times and talked about it, so we're confident in his ability to make the project an asset for the community as well. So.
Tax credits, they require a local match usually, correct?
They actually removed that requirement because they found out that depending on the community that you were going into, it was very challenging, for example, a really small community to be able to meet those requirements.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is important to point out that the project estimated at $9.1 million, so it's a considerable facility. There was a lengthy staff report. I didn't really touch on a lot of that because I think a lot of the comments on Thursday are going to be relative to what I just had talked about, but if there are comments, I'd be welcome to ask those.
So the public hearing on Thursday is concerning what?
It's rezoning the property.
Just the rezoning. It's not
C4 to PDR.
Approving the project or any incentive to the project, or?
Nope, it's just a simple rezoning.
The
property that so the property that's north of 5th Avenue, east of 22nd Street is, I guess I should say the 22nd Street extending north to 6th Ave, so this blue line. If you recall, some of you may recall, actually, I don't know, I guess it's been quite a while, but the former EIC roofing contractor was located on the property.
Sure.
On some of this property, they had a shingle grinding operation. We had a lot of nuisance issues and complaints relative to that property. When they decided to move, understanding what was going on, the city did step in and we did acquire the property. That property was not acquired under the threat of condemnation. It was just merely an opportunity to take care of a nuisance property. The council chose to move in that direction, so we did acquire the property. I think there's been quite a bit of conversation in the community about how much we paid for the property, and I'd have to go back and look. I think it was about $364,000 is what was paid for that property, but this is only a portion of it, so there's still another side to the property. I don't know what the square footage is, so we're only we're only, I guess, selling a portion of that property with this project. So that property was zoned planned development residential. In other words, we have to see what's going to happen on that property before it moves forward, planned development. If you recall, the same company and a different kind of division of the same company had applied for some tax credits. It's probably been 5 or 6 years ago on the same property, and we rezoned the former EIC piece, PDR, to accompany their application to the state. They did not receive those tax credits, but the zoning still remains. This project makes use of additional ground that we own, the Lacey property, so we're zoning that next piece, the PDR, so it's consistent with the zoning that was put in place prior. So that's why the property already has some of the PDR zoning. So does that make sense? I kind of rambled a little bit.
So the decision on Thursday is purely related to how should this property be used?
Yes.
Whether it should continue as warehouse or
what's
commercial, or transition to what is more in line with the vision for this central corridor transforming into.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just a question on around that area. At C4 Warehouse, are there any buildings that are 4 stories that are currently around there? I'm just curious in terms of scale, if that eventually comes through. What else is there because it's warehouse district? Are there any?
So east of here are some what I'd call pretty large lot single-family homes, smaller homes on a single family, or single-family homes on a fairly large, narrow but large lot. About 3 lots down, there's a warehouse, like a mini storage. On the south side's primarily residential, 2-story, kind of like what I would consider almost like a 4-square front porch, 2-story home. Some may be ranch in style. I'm not sure how many, but there's a mix of those. As you go west, there are some warehouse uses. One of the reasons that the 4-story option, I think, will fit fine here is that there's some elevation changes between 5th and 6th Avenue. So on the back side, you'll definitely see a solid 4. On the front side, it'll probably be more of a 3-story view shed. On the north side is the Quality Auto, which is a larger warehouse, and I don't think that building is probably any greater than a 1.5 story home. So it will be a striking change in that area. But I will say that in the corridor, we fully anticipate on the south side of 6th Avenue going east and west to having taller buildings that are primarily residential in nature on the south side of 6th Avenue to buffer. So essentially you're going to create a major arterial, which is 6th Avenue, and then you'll see a higher intensity residential district with buildings of this nature, and then transitioning south of 5th, we'll try to maintain that medium to low density residential. So it's
the Marriott's not too far from there. That's 4-story.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yep.
5 blocks.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions?
Number 3.
I think the next item starred is the public hearing related to the property east of 13. This is the project that's been talked about at the council for quite a few meetings. We're in a situation where we held the public hearing, I believe, at the last meeting, and then we held actually the meeting before, I think we held the public hearing, and then we had the first reading and the second reading. This meeting was proposed to be the 3rd reading of that ordinance, and I think the council wanted to ensure that there was adequate public ability to come to the council and raise any issues or questions or comments they had on this project. What had occurred, though, is we had scheduled the public hearing, we'd set the notice. However, the notice did not get published, so it was an error on the Times' behalf, and it just didn't get into the paper. So what we've done is we've renoticed the public hearing. So I'll need to verify, but it should have been in the paper in accordance with the standard, which is 4 and 20. And so we have the public hearing is back on the agenda. We did send out the notices to all the adjacent residents when we did the original notice, like we would do with any project. We did not do that on this, so we didn't send it back out to all the neighbors, but this would be the third reading. What we'd like to have happen is that we could waive the 3 readings associated with, or hold the first reading and waive the final 2 readings associated with the public hearing on Thursday, and move to the resolution approving the land use plan, which we've already done once, and then do the preliminary site development plan and preliminary plat. There's literally going to be 3 readings of the ordinance consistent with what we would have to do. It was just that because that original public hearing notice didn't make it to the legals, we have to make sure that that happens. And that's why we've republished the public hearing. But this would be the third reading of the ordinance and the second public hearing that we've held, just one was not noticed in the paper.
Okay.
I know that was a lot, and it made sense to me, but please ask me if there's questions on that.
So when we're suspending the rules, and we're not really waiving anything,
Yes, you would be suspending the rules because we had to start the public hearing process over. Again, we're going to hold the public...
Already had 2 readings.
We already had 2 readings, yes. So we'll hold the public hearing. That will essentially be the third time we've read the ordinance in the second public hearing. So we're just suspending the rules on the additional 2 readings after the formal publication of the notice.
I see. You have a question? Yes.
Just to clarify, so, but the public has only been noticed one fewer time than they should have because of the leave out in the paper?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And when we held that public hearing the first time, and I wasn't at that meeting, but I don't think anybody spoke on that. That's the one where we sent the notice. I mean, we had sent the notices to each property owner within 300 feet of the property. So
I think Renee was gone.
Oh.
No, I was here for that.
Were you here for that
Yep.
one?
And do you know, have we received any additional comments from neighbors?
No.
Anyone?
It's been pretty quiet out there. I would say that I was surprised by that. I mean, it's a big project and a lot of acres, and there were a substantial number of folks that came to the Planning Commission meeting, so it was a surprise on staff's behalf as well.
I think everybody's homeschooling their children because there's been no school all month, pretty much. So they're all
So the one thing on here, I will say that 7 and 8 have not been, 7 and 8, the preliminary site development plan and the preliminary plat, have not been talked about at all. Now, I did provide that information. It's pretty consistent with what you've seen in the past. Were there any specific questions on the preliminary plat or the preliminary site development plan? I know this is where it gets kind of in the technical details. I think we've covered most of that in the conversations we've had with the council in the past. But if there are, feel free to reach out to me on those, or if you have questions now. But I won't go through that since you've seen it all more than one time.
Okay. Any questions on any of those items 3 through 8? All related to each other? None. Okay. Next, for item number 9, seeing that Mayor Pro Tem has left the room, we'll have Deputy Mayor Pro Tem handle this next one.
Okay. Number 9.
The next 2, I guess.
So on Thursday, there'll be a public hearing regarding the vacation of a portion of 16th Street. This property is located north of 5th, south of 6th Ave, west of what was the former APC Emirates site. When you look at this map, it kind of would seem odd that we would vacate a street that goes through. However, when Sixth Avenue is constructed in this vicinity, there will not be access provided to Sixth Avenue in this location. So that there won't be a curb cut. And so that is ultimately going to go away, the access to Sixth Avenue in that location. So the vacation would make sense at this point. What we've done in a lot of those areas is provided for where we have to actually go in and do improvements in the corridor, put hammerheads in to allow for emergency services to turn around. In this instance, there is one property owner that has property to the west that they would have the first right of refusal in the actual sale of the property. Genesis owns the property to the east, and they would like to acquire their half and likely the other half, but at this point, it's just being vacated, so the sale would not happen until we've had further conversations.
Okay. Any questions on number 9? Will?
The property to the west, is that need to be purchased for 6th Avenue?
No.
Are they going to have a drive access onto 6th Avenue for their driveway?
They will.
Okay.
Yep.
And then,
you can kind of see it roughly how they do access to the north there, but there is curb cut accommodations being made for them as a part of the project.
And then, so it's just vacating it for now.
Mm-hmm. We would ensure there's an access easement over it in the interim to provide access in the interim.
My only concern would be that it should stay open up until construction happens on 6th Avenue, and I guess it gets shut down for construction.
Yeah.
And that's the case?
Yes. Yes.
Well, that kind of goes to the 3 calls I've had, and I've been fairly accurate, and Tom confirms, I think, that truthfully, if you're on 6th Avenue, that never was a street. 16th. It shouldn't have joined
it should.
5th and 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue.
17th was the one that never. 17th.
Right.
Never went, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have gone there anyway.
Yeah. There's a significant, and that's the next one. The next item on the agenda is 17th Street.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think everybody remembers when APC Emirate was there. There was like a 20-foot drop. Now, when 6th Avenue is constructed, I believe in that area the street elevation is lowered a little bit, but still wouldn't provide for a street connection. I think 15th is about as steep as we want to see a connection in that area.
Paul, what were the calls? You said you had 3 calls about this.
They basically were concerned about being forced to use the roundabout.
Well, you can go down to 22nd.
They claim that that's the most often used street in the morning, people going to work to get to 7th Avenue. Is what the argument was.
15th?
Mm-hmm. I have no idea if that being the fact, but that was their argument,
And there will be a lot of changes to that connectivity that exists now with the corridor plan as it moves forward. So next year at this time, hopefully, we'll be having those conversations, and I'm sure that this will be one of those 16th Street being blocked. It'll be blocked on the north side from the connection south as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll really help when we get open to the roundabout.
Absolutely. No question about it. Yeah.
I think that's a downfall right now.
There's some growing pains. Yeah. Absolutely.
Steve?
So, question, Tom. What on 6th Avenue, starting from 15th Street going east, I know we got 15th and 31st. What other streets are going to connect to 6th Avenue?
So you'll have 22nd Street will be a full access intersection.
That's there now.
That'll be, 22nd will go alongside the apartment building. So that'll be a new connection to 6th.
Okay.
But that'll be a substantial one because it'll go all the way to Highway 100. 22nd Street. And then as you go west, Mike, I'm going to ask for some help
East,
here.
going further east,
27th.
is that the only one then?
Oh,
We're gonna jump
going
from
east, that's-
22nd
Yep.
to 31st?
27th, where the roundabout is.
Yep.
Oh,
Well, there'll be a south leg of that roundabout. in the
okay,
future.
leg coming off of that.
Mhm.
Okay.
And between 22nd and 15th, there's no there's not another full access intersection,
Right.
but I believe 19th and I think 19th might be the only one that actually is a right in, right out in that area. So you'll be able to go up 19th, I believe, and take a right. Deb may remember too. I can't remember right offhand, but
Well, 19th goes up to 7th Avenue.
currently it goes all the way through, but it'll ultimately just go to 6th, and then it'll be a right in, right out.
Oh, that will?
Yep, yep.
Okay, I did not know that.
I'll bring that. I'll have the illustration on Thursday, so if there are questions on that, because I'm assuming there will be some.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about vacating some, it just kind of brings up the question of what are the connectivities,
Yep.
from 5th to 7th and
Well,
up to 6th.
If you go out there and look at the elevation change, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Well, and the speeds will increase, from what's there now, obviously, it's a gravel road, but, and that's a 4-lane, I mean, you don't, that would be a difficult full access intersection to begin with.
Okay.
I mean,
Anyone else?
I was just going to say, in all reality, you're only taking away one road because 17th isn't used, and you're adding 2 in the future down further to the west. So you're losing 1, but you're adding 2.
Yeah.
That's
so,
fair.
yeah.
Yeah, Tom, I think visuals would be helpful Thursday.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go all the way to the south. That's the thing.
16th, yeah. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't go
Just
anywhere.
a third.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a few dead-end streets there.
Yeah.
Anything else on number 9? Okay, moving on to number 11 then.
So number 11 is, I'll just leave this map up at, well, let me change it out just so you can see. Now we're just shifting the red box to the east to this location where the proposal is to not only vacate but to also sell that portion of 17th Street. This has never really been a full access intersection as Councilman Draper had indicated. Kind of been a nuisance problem for the city, I think, and the property owners over a period of time. When APC Emirate was there, they basically operated their business on the right-of-way. There's about I want to say about 10 or 15-foot elevation drop between 5th and 6th Avenue in that location. Now you can see that here's a car parked. It's like at the top of the car, and then it shifts down. But that's where the right-of-way literally is. I think if you go out there now, you can see where people are actually having some fun driving up the hill. Kind of want to see that sometime. But anyway, it's so that's the part that's being proposed to be vacated and sold. And there is a redevelopment project being considered on this location in the future. They just haven't really brought through plans at this point. But it clearly makes sense to vacate and sell that. And then there is the cost analysis relative to that. Here's it looking south, actually, from 6th as well. What used to be here, there used to be those little Quonset huts. There was like silver buildings extending all the way to 6th Avenue on this side, and that's where APC Emirate was, and I think there were some buildings over here too. But it's going to be pretty staggering to see what that change to that corridor is when that road is put in. It's going to be pretty dramatic, I think.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
It's going to be nice.
So within the packet, there was the analysis that was done for the final cost of acquisition of that portion of right-of-way, which is about $4,397. So that would be the acquisition cost associated with the project. So we would move forward with that as well.
Okay, any questions on 11? Will?
Yep. What about the southern section of 17th there that's not in red? Well,
So the
north
reason
of
that's
5th.
not, so there's 2 separate property owners associated with these, and so there was not a desire by the owners to sell those portions or to purchase those portions. So we just kind of left them alone at this point.
Is the building on the west side of 17th there that's not Genesis, is that still that auto detailing
I believe so.
shop?
Yep.
So there's no talk of that
Not at this
changing
point.
hands
Yeah,
that
not
you've
at
heard
this
of?
point. Not that
There's
I've,
been a lot of comments from neighbors about the smell and over from when Vic was mayor.
Yeah.
For years and years and years, so the fumes and just,
yeah, I think there's been some questions to the owners of that in the past, yeah. I think it's been inspected probably numerous times for fire safety as well, based on the fumes.
So we're just gonna keep it as a road and maintain it and clear it and. Does it get plowed now?
I don't think we're plowing that at this point.
None of it? Okay.
Okay, anyone else on 11? Okay, back to you, Mayor.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Happy birthday, Tom.
Well, thank you.
Happy
Oh,
birthday.
happy birthday.
Yesterday, right?
Yep, yesterday. 28.
29. Oh.
Yeah, nice readers, 29. Yeah, right? We're all in the same club.
Okay. Under the city managers section.
Thank you, Your Honor. The item up for discussion and deliberation under my section tonight is the memorandum of agreement regarding the operations of the new community recreation center. I had put out a copy for the council and highlighted the differences between the one that we have for consideration and the one that I think was originally included in the council packet. We had one, and then the amended version came in, and I think there was some confusion about which item was up for consideration. So I wanted to make sure you had the latest one and highlighted the differences between the two versions in yellow. The date changed, moving from February to March 2020, and I know that Councilwoman Gadela had expressed some concerns about the language regarding the number of members on the advisory board, and that language was tightened up to ensure that it was 7. There was also a change regarding the 7th member of that board. Rather than having it have to be jointly determined by City Council and the YMCA board, that was deferred over to the Parks Director and the CEO of the YMCA. And then the last sentence that's highlighted was added, which specifies that should the size of that board change in the future, that the size of it would always remain odd, and that both entities would always have equal number of representatives. So, for example, if it was moved to 9, it would be 4 and 4 rather than 3 and 3. And looking through it, I did not see other changes related to it, but the sequence of events is such that right now that the YMCA board would be meeting tomorrow to ratify the agreement from their end, and then it could come back to the council on Thursday. So I wanted to see if there were any final changes that council wanted to see in it before it goes to the Y board for consideration. One thing I would note is that the agreement does have, under Section 1, it does reiterate the ask for the city to increase the overall municipal contribution by $800,000. I would rather see the council act on that separately than approve it in the agreement, because all it specifies in here is a dollar amount. In addition to the increased ask, they had also requested that the city council change the timing of it and draw the dollars forward so that the contribution was being done all at once. So if council is so inclined, we would actually have a separate resolution on Thursday for action on that, and a resolution then approving the agreement itself. Councilman Sternod had asked me to run some numbers about what the difference looks like as far as the total contribution of the city in the different funding scenarios that we had outlined. And if you remember back to the 3 that we had initially looked at, one of which was to go with what's in the CIP right now. The second one was to just bring all the dollars forward but not increase our total contribution. And then the last one was to bring the dollars forward and increase our total contribution. Based on my quick and dirty estimates, the first 2 have a cost difference of about $20,000. there are some differences in how you pay it out, and the second one does lean on the Tower Terrace West tax increment financing district a little bit to make up some costs at about $110,000. The third one, in essence, just to break it down and simplify it, adding the $800,000 to the project by the time you do interest and everything else comes in right at $1 million total with the debt service and everything to it. So that's the net impact, the cost difference between the scenarios with the additional contribution and then bringing the dollars forward. But bringing the dollars forward was pretty negligible in the overall cost to the community, only about $20,000 difference based on the way I'm looking at it here. So I know we have some representatives from the Y here. There were some questions that council asked me during some meetings this week. I had let the Y representatives know what those were. Questions about where they were sitting at regarding overall fundraising and then how their side was coming on the private financing. So if you were so inclined, I would ask them to address those questions since they've been much more directly involved with it than I have.
Quick questions? Go ahead.
I have a couple about the MOU still. Should I go now or wait? Okay. So first of all, I want to thank Lon for reading my questions in my absence, and I listened to both the work session and the public meeting, and I heard the responses by someone who isn't here, right? Wasn't there someone else from the Y board? Okay. And I was happy with or fine with most of those. I still... I'm glad that the language is cleaned up on number 3 so that it's defined at 7 members, and then there's equity 3 and 3. But my question about this advisory committee is, what is the purpose of the committee? So we know when they're going to meet, and we know who it's going to consist of. But when you look at number 6, the very last sentence, it says advisory committee can review and implement, but there's nothing about approval in there. So what is the authority of this advisory committee? Because if they're just in name only, it's not very meaningful. So if you could elaborate on what they will be responsible for and what authority they'll have, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, Bob Carlson, 1195 Seacrest Road, Marion. Steve Dolezal did do that for me. I was ill, and so Steve Dolezal, our COO, did. That's who you're referring to. The advisory committee, we do those right now with our branches. So we see those very similar, and when I talked to Mike with Parks and Rec, we kind of came to an agreement on this. This committee is, it says advisory, and that's what we call it. I'm not sure that's, maybe the name is kind of a hang-up, but our branch advisory committees look at space and program utilization and moving forward with operations and a lot of those kinds of things. The reason they're advisory and they're not policy making is because our board is the fiduciary responsibility of our organization, and they are accountable for making the fiduciary policy making decisions. And because we're the owners of the facility, we have to keep that way for our bylaws. But this group would be intact to meet regularly, talk about programs, talk about spaces, talk about dollars and cents moving forward, how things are operating and moving forward on a branch kind of basis. We do have to have our board make those policy decisions, however.
So if the advisory committee came forth with a recommendation that the board didn't agree with, it wouldn't put it forward, correct?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that the branches that you have have these advisory committees, and so you're trying to be consistent with that. Do they have the same size contribution from the cities that they're in that Marion is being asked for? Are they the same? We're kind of blending a lot of our programming with Parks and Rec, and we're looking at a $7.3 million ask.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there is consistency in how the other funding for those Ys came to be, if the cities that they're in.
This is a unique, as you know.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking for some unique.
So we have to work through this somehow to make sure that, and I'm open for suggestions on language and how we do this, but with the Y being the owner of this, recognizing that the city's coming forward very big on the process, we've got to have somebody making those fiduciary responsibilities. Now, we will have those folks sitting on our board, so those folks would come forward.
Maybe
whoever
that's
we
what
decided.
I don't understand. sitting on your board. So the board who makes the fiduciary decisions,
Right.
how many Marion people will be on that board?
We are open for suggestions on that. We have, our board can be anywhere from 21 to 33 people. So we're open for suggestions on that. We would hope there'd be a lot more Marion residents that would come forward to be on our board. Folks on the advisory committee would be the first ones we'd be talking to about doing that.
Sure, okay.
So they would be there as a seat on the board. Now,
And that addresses my concern. If there are just residents, if we have enough representation on that, the ultimate decision makers, because the advisory committee sounds like they just make recommendations, but they're not doing anything with teeth. So I don't know if you can, at your meeting tomorrow, make that decision so that it's concrete when we're making this decision on what percentage of the board who will make the fiduciary decisions be Marion residents, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at.
I think we're averaging right now about a third of the people on our board are Marion residents already, because we just have such a presence in Marion. So we're going, because our board's a corporate board, a metro board, we're looking for folks from all across the metro area to serve on our board. So we're open for suggestions on how that works. We're not going to limit the amount of people that Marion would be able to be a part of the process, especially since it's such a big, it's a big process, and there's a lot of people that are very excited about it that want to be a part of it.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to explain that our board has to have the fiduciary responsibility, just because we're the owners.
That makes sense. Yeah. I understand that. And then my last question is on number 4, it says, please see attached financial projections for an estimate of these said costs. And I don't know if I just didn't receive that with my stuff, or if none of us has gotten that.
We have a pro forma that we've used for our fundraising and continue to use in our fundraising that we're happy to share with you if you'd like to see that.
That would be great. If you could email it tomorrow, I guess, for everybody's benefit, since it's part of this, which we're asked to approve.
Yeah, and is that what we were talking about, Zach, when you said that? Or was that more of the... Yeah, I think that was more rather than that, I think that was more the expense allocation that we were talking about with the city when we were talking about putting that program together, and we're not quite there with that yet. We're working on the program offerings that the Y and the city can do together, which is a lot and big, but I don't think we're quite there with the expense offerings yet. I'm sorry, I'm confused.
And so, Lon, I'm going to ask you, is this something that is necessary for this is this typical that this would come later?
That's something that is really getting down into the details about how the facility is going to operate. Normally that is something that would come later, because that's something that would be worked out between the Y staff and the Parks staff to come up with that expense allocation, and then you'd see it reflected in the budgets proposed going forward.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Sorry, I was confused at that.
Yeah, no worries.
I didn't look back at it. But we are working diligently on that with the city. We have a separate subgroup of folks that are working on that. So Mike and I.
Great, I'm good with that.
But I would see Mike and I being a part of this, somehow being a part of this advisory group that meets regularly, or our designated folks that we would put on there.
Or a representative.
Our representatives, branch executive for Marion, whoever the parks would want to do. So we would have there would be volunteerism, yes, but there would also be staff connectivity back to it.
Okay, that's all I had on this. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Brandt.
To piggyback off our questions about the advisory board, you had talked about how they would make recommendations on, or discuss programming in the facility. So is that advisory board going to make the decisions on what programs are offered at the Marion branch, or does that still have to go to your YMCA board for a decision on what programs are at this location?
That's really more of that function of that group. That's what I saw this in the beginning, was that group gets together, because all of our branches in all of our communities work a little bit differently every way. So we give them the autonomy, staying within the brand of what we're doing, to make those programs work. So I answered that a long way, but they would make those decisions about programming, timing, who's in the gyms at this time. You know, there's a lot to do there.
So the Y board would deal with the money, basically, and then the advisory boards would deal with more the day-to-day operations of what's going on at the...
Yeah, we have really never had a situation where an advisory group would make a recommendation to our Y board and the board would say no to it. I mean, it's always really done on the grassroots level first, and then it's done.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Councilmember Draper.
This is probably an issue in 7 years that has been a real wrestling match for me.
Yes, sir.
It's fair, I should tell you, I started out, pardon me, and I'm having a little hard time, thinking that building onto the current facility was the answer to the whole thing. I've had so many arguments about being so far away from our South Side kids. I've had all the arguments in the world. I've sat here for 7 years, and we don't, all of us, run into things that sometimes we vote in favor of because we feel it's the best thing for our community. And that's where I am on the why. I do have one item that bothers me some, and that is under your item number 1, and Lon kind of explained. I would like to let my people know that we are never, the city, going to be a piggy bank. Once the 7.3 is spent, I would like to see a sentence in there, and the city will not be asked for any additional funding. We put in there now that you're going to go out and raise the money, but I would feel real comfortable if you would put something in your minutes saying, we're not going to ask the city of Marion. They've done their job. They helped us. They've done their job. I went as far as I called a bus company to see if we could have a bus stop out there for the South Side kids, and they say that's a possibility. So we have a lot of positive things, and this is an item that because I think it's the best thing for our community that I plan to vote in for.
Thank you for that comment. I totally agree with you that it's the best thing for our city. We answer questions all the time about location, and we're trying to work. You know, we started out in an early process to figure out where Marion's moving and where that residential is going to be, the best place to locate a building so people don't drive by something else before they come to your facility. There's lots of we did a lot of studies, I'm sure, with that to figure out the best place for it to be. I know one of the things that you've talked about, Councilman Draper, is that whether the kids can get there. We did some studies. We're just finishing some of those that talk about how the kids get there. And we would like to think they all ride their bikes, but they don't. The parents stop outside the door and drop them off, and they run in the building, and then the parents come pick them up. And a bus stop would be awesome because we have those we have that downtown, and that helps a lot for our kids. So as this grows, I know there will be more access to get folks to this location because of Tower Terrace and all that's going on with trails and everything else. But just to put you at ease a little bit, when the kids get there, they get there by personal transportation somehow, in a car basically. Parents drop them off. I did it when my kids were young. I had a van. I dropped them off. I came back and picked them up. So there's a lot more of that than you would.
I'm sure it's a bit easier to ride a bike to where you are now.
Yeah, it's a little bit, easier, it's in town, I understand that. So duly noted. I will say that I don't know how many times I've said it, this contribution from the city is unmatched by any in this state towards a recreational center / YMCA. It's unmatched. It's unbelievable. We will take these dollars the way that's laid out, and it will help us get our financing package done. We're in the works of doing that right now. That's happening as we speak, so that if this all hopefully moves forward, we can pull the trigger and start this process because we also know that will trigger fundraising as we move forward. So that's a big thing. We're not stopping fundraising. We're raising money, right, as we speak, but this will help us immensely to get it done. But this is all we ask for the city. We're not asking for operational dollars. We're not coming back. What's that? Yeah, we're not asking for operational dollars or anything else. We've got the pro forma set to make this thing happen, and the YMCA is accountable for that.
Right. Councilmember Jensen has a question.
I think, well, I was going to make a comment about Paul's and talking about kids riding bikes. Again, when I go to the Y all the time during the summer, you don't see a lot of bikes. And again, just because of how things are today, kids are not allowed to ride their bikes all over the city, like they did when I was in grade school. And I was in 4th and 5th grade. I mean, we were all over town, for the entire day. Unfortunately, parents just aren't comfortable with the kids doing that. Another comment I would add.
Little narrow tires now, not like on you.
That's true. That's true, too. I think another comment, just to let the city council know and everybody, is that we had a building committee meeting this morning, very good meeting with Knutson, who's going to be the general contractor for this project. So we had a very complete package, a breakdown of cost. We have an excellent timeline. So we have everything in place from that standpoint for them ready to go once the financing gets completed. Obviously, you got some I's to dot, T's to cross, but they are ready to go. We've looked at all of the details. The other good thing is they continue to find some ways to reduce the cost. So Knutson has done an absolute excellent job over the past 5 months. So if there's a benefit to this project being delayed, part of it is they've had some additional time working with their subcontractors to find some more ways to reduce the cost. So the overall budget number has continued to go down for the cost of this project. That's a positive. So I think that's going to help for the entire success of the project.
Thanks for those comments, Steve. And I will also reiterate that even with delaying it to where we have today, those numbers have continued to come down rather than escalate because of, timing issues. So there's going to be an end point to that. We got to get going, or else they're going to lose some of those subs that they've been working with that are so good. But you're right, the costs have continued to come down, which is the right direction, obviously.
And we were concerned that with a delay getting into the winter, there'd be some more cost added. It's been actually about just the opposite from an overall standpoint. But they are ready to go whenever the financing gets done and start moving dirt.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Sternad.
Lon, couple questions here. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. The option that we've selected to go with, this is a $1 million cost to the city for the $800,000 plus expenses that have been loaded into this, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of components to that. One of the things with a bond issuance is that things like legal expenses don't tend to change very much because your cost of doing the proceedings and everything are basically the same regardless of how large the bond issue is. But by the time you take that $800,000 and add the interest over the repayment period, using the numbers I was running it at, which was I think I was using 3.4 or 3.2 over 15 years. It does come out at about $1 million to the overall project.
Sure. And just in summary, again, the reason why we're even here is because the lending institution required a guarantee because they would not allow the financing to go through for the YMCA as it was proposed to begin with. Is that right?
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, we were, with what we saved in interest costs by having the dollars up front plus the $800,000, which is like half of the first ask that we had, if you remember right, was getting us to that. It's kind of a two-phase approach. We have a pledge note period to get us started, and then we have an end note with another financial institution. Both of them are here in town that is looking to take that end note on, and that got that deal done.
Gotcha. Again, too, and I'm going to reiterate a few of these points because I think it's critical that we understand why we're here. These will be two separate issues. These will be two separate issues on the agenda then for Thursday, correct? agreement will be as a line item and the ask will be for a separate line item as well. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Mr. Carlson, can you tell us what have you brought in for fundraising in the last 30 days?
About $200,000 is what we're getting some of the smaller gifts in at this stage of the game. We are still working on, Zach's working on a lot of the bigger gifts with the state and with a couple other foundations that we're working in. So we've identified about $4 or $5 million that we see coming in with groundbreaking, including about another $1 million with community campaign that we have geared up for now with another staff person and boots on the ground. So we've got a really good pathway going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Yes. Mr. Brantley.
Okay. Lon, so can you answer if we do the money of the 7.3 upfront as one, how does that affect the tax levy for our next budget or the year after?
It wouldn't show up in the budget that we're working on right now. The impact of it would be felt in the following budget. Let me pull it up. I had done a memo discussing that. But the original anticipated impact would have been about 7 cents a year in additional impact, adding up over 3 years for around 21 cents. And the way I had it constructed, we'd be using local option sales tax up front as cash to help buy that down through the early financing period. Let me find that note. So under the third scenario, the last set of estimates that I did would show that it would be about 6 cents, which would start in presumably FY21 at this point, and then FY22 would be about 14 cents, FY23 would be around 20 cents, but that was anticipating, I was using the same 3% scenario that we used for the CIP. So more years like the one that we've had where we end up with 5.4 or 5.7%, that number comes down. That was consistent with the original scenario of 3 different contributions over a period of 3 fiscal years. The main difference is that we were going to use some of the proceeds from the Tower Terrace West TIF district to help buy that cost down in future years to make sure that we stayed level.
So that the 14 and the 20 cents, that was before buying it down?
That includes a partial buy down. There are options for the council to buy that down further.
Anyone else? Okay.
You know, I have one more question.
Yes.
So I guess it was decided, because I know it was brought up at one point where businesses in Marion could have, their employees could have some type of discount or, I don't know, whatever we discussed before. Is that, I didn't see that in here, so that's been taken.
Well, we have
not going to do that at all.
We currently have a pretty lucrative corporate membership program. As a matter of fact, the city of Marion is one of them. And usually about the lowest discounted percent a business gets, and we know there's a lot of small businesses, would be like a 10% discount for employees. So we would go out and actively market those businesses for that membership. So it would be really difficult if you're in business in this town to not get at least a 10% membership when you're moving forward in a business, from a business standpoint.
And that's a continuous thing, so whereas
it's not specific.
That happens yearly.
That's their policy.
Right.
So it's not in here because we currently do that
already.
and
Okay.
it's pretty lucrative.
Okay.
A lot of Ys don't do corporate memberships, but we do because we have a lot of competition in town that does it, and we really feel like we have to in order to stay in the game. So that would be something we would be doing actively in Marion, would be soliciting businesses because, you know, there's already a group of folks there that we can make.
Which you're already doing, I assume.
We already do that in Marion.
Okay.
Yeah, we have like Linn-Mar schools and Marion schools. I mean, we have a lot of corporate memberships in the city of Marion already.
Okay, thank you.
It's not in here because it's pretty lucrative anyway. So we have I mean, it's kind of a discount world. I hate to say that, but we can't discount it to the point where we can't operate it. But a lot of these we build into our operations, and it works.
Okay. Thanks.
Even small, I want to mention too, because we have a lot of small businesses in Marion. Even smaller businesses, we don't really have a bottom number that we don't discount, because a lot of these businesses only have 2, 3, 4 people in their business. So we kind of level the playing field. We do offer a bigger discount to some of the larger corporations and some of the, you know, the big schools in the city, and because there's just more to draw from. Is that acceptable?
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I have an item that it's too good to pass up. And I got a flip phone yet, and I got a little message on here a minute ago that said, "Don't do it again." And it was from the Mayo Clinic, the Dr. Warren's. And I'm wearing this 48-hour heart monitor. And the last time, the night I was wearing it, it kept coming loose. So I put it on my dog for about 2 hours. So I just got a memo from her saying, "Don't do that again." They said Gus was very healthy, by the way.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you. Meeting is adjourned. We'll see everyone on Thursday.